landfill, garbage, all that stuff, but mostly landfill. But I wanted to kind of give you an overview. I'll talk a little bit about what we're responsible to do as far as protecting surface water, the air, that kind of stuff. How we build the landfills, some of the materials we use, because a lot of people just don't understand the technology and the cost to building a landfill. I can tell you right now, to put a cell in, 1 acre of a cell, line cell with clay and everything, is about $700,000 an acre. So they're not inexpensive. Our equipment, you know, it's upwards of $1 million each piece of equipment. So there's a lot of capital costs that are put into running a landfill. Probably very similar to a pit, it's expensive. But this is an aerial view of the landfill. Right now we're at 95 acres. 58 acres is the landfill. That's one thing that whenever you have a landfill, you don't build out to the boundaries. You have buffer property. But this is an aerial view. This is a good view of the expansion property that we purchased, 388 acres. Kind of runs into here. This is on the north side. This is going to be 195 acres of actual landfill footprint out of the 388. So there'll be some stormwater retention ponds and things of that nature. As part of the expansion, this entrance area is tough, and it's got long, you know, we get lines sometimes out here, this long lines. We're bringing in an entrance area, and it's going to be constructed kind of in this, going this way, and we're going to have about 2,000 feet of roadway. So we won't have any queuing on the road. We'll have a newer, bigger wheel wash, a lot of really nice upgrades to the facility, and different ways into the landfill so we can minimize queuing. If you've been here on the weekends and sometimes been an hour plus in line because waiting to get out, it's tough. But that'll get better with the expansion of the new facility. So this is kind of the overview. So I want to talk a little bit about the cell developments we do. Everything within, so a couple things first. We took this over in 2005, I believe, and we've been part of what's the Subtitle D landfill design. The older portion of the landfill was pre-Subtitle D, and what that means, it was just different materials. So now we have to use, back then pre-Subtitle D, they used clay liners, 10 to the minus 7, I think, back then. And it was just clay liners. Now we use a variety of different liners. And I kind of got, if you want to look at this, so let's look at this. This is a good representation. This is one of the cells we just built, the last one we just built. And it's lined like a bathtub, essentially. And it's got all these different layers, and I can go through that too. But it's basically lined like a bathtub. All the subgrade drains down to certain points in the landfill where the leachate, the liquids that come in, we don't bring liquids, but trash does, as this gets compacted, there'll be liquids that come out. That leachate goes into pump stations, and those pump stations pump it into the publicly owned treatment works. So no leachate gets out of the landfill. So we contain everything, all the liquids and that in the landfill. When we design and build, we always put things into grade and have drainage so the surface water doesn't settle into the landfill and create more leachate. It runs off into the storm systems, into the different ponds. So we do surface water too. But this is actual liner. Actually, we put a 30 mil scrim on top of it because it's actually soil, just to protect it from rainwater. But basically what we do, we prepare the native subgrade, then we put down a foot of clay, 10 to the minus 7, this is a 6, 10 to the minus 7, low permeability clay. We put a geocomposite clay liner in there. It's a geomat kind of secondary protection. Then it's a minimum of 60 mil liners. Some landfills have 80 mil liners like Potrero, but it's 60 mil HDPE membrane that goes in there, and I'll show you that right here. Then we put a geotextile 12-ounce cushion layer on that. Then we put a minimum of 1 foot of gravel, and within that gravel, that's where we have, can't really see in here, but there's trenches in here that are under the subgrade that are actual leachate lines. So when the liquids come down, they go into these pipes, and then they go down and they go into a sump. So everything's graded to drain, and that's in that gravel layer. And then we put a non-woven geotextile separator. Then we put a minimum of 1 foot operations layer of soil compacted on the top. Yeah. So then we put that on there. Then we put soft trash. So the first lift will be 5 to 6 feet. What we call soft trash, like your residential trash, maybe your commercial trash, no bulky stuff. We don't want to put anything big on there, so we put that soft. Sometimes we'll use green waste, compost overs. Some landfills use tire shreds as long as they're shredded to 64, just to put a cushion layer. And then you can start putting your trash on top of that and then compacting it down. And then we effectively build to our final design plans, interim and final design plans. Don't have one up here, but it shows how all this is graded to drain. This is a former class 1 area. It's been here since the 50s, I believe. We used to dump pesticides, herbicides, and things like that. Right now we've got a stockpile of soil on it. This is one thing we're considering, and it's part of our agreement to look at this, to remediate this at some point in the future, remove that material and close it and create more landfill. we're effectively going to be expanding out this way. So you can see if we expand out this way, that would be a good portion of the landfill, but that's something to look at.
Is it mostly liquids and drums, or?
I think so. I don't know.
Yeah, it was herbicides, pesticides, drums.
drums.
And, you know, in that era, it was okay to dispose of them in a municipal landfill. We've never actually buried any waste in that area. You know, it's been hands off. The only thing we've ever done is put soil on top of it, surcharge, stockpile. So the idea, if it measures up, we're going to, if it's not too contaminated, we'll exhume it and then put it on liner. So we're fixing kind of a, you know, what do you call it? You know, a cancer or a problem that exists from the history of the landfill. As a matter of fact, that Class 1 site is owned by the city of Hollister. But both the county and the city are very interested in not having that as a potential liability down the road. And so our plan, our expansion plan, entails taking care of that potential issue that could arise over time.
So, like I was saying, there's a portion of this landfill that's pre-Subtitle D, and the only time we put waste over that is after we put a liner material on the old landfill, and then we direct all of the leachate that comes into the new Subtitle D. We've never had any compliance issues as it relates to, you know, leaks or anything like that with the Subtitle D portion since we've been operating. It's good technology, and we've been doing a good job with that. A couple of other things, we have to have stormwater plans. We have drainage benches and have everything that has to drain. We have to sample it routinely. You know, we have to meet pretty strict standards. In fact, we have a lot of our stormwater that goes into this pond and we let it settle out. It's over the hill. In fact, we still have to dig out the sediment from last year before this rainy season. And then what we do is we let it settle out. We sample it for turbidity, which is your solids. And then we'll use a fair cloth skimmer if we have to let some of the water off. It's been so dry, we haven't had much water going on site. We have a couple other retention ponds in the back that control other portions of the landfill, so we really want to control that. Go ahead.
In a day like today, or a period like this period, it should just evaporate off, most of it, wouldn't it? Or
Yeah, it depends. Yeah, if we get rain like last year, we got, I think it was end of January, we got 2 inches of rain, almost 3 inches of rain in a 24-hour period. It filled up that pond pretty good, halfway or so, but it evaporated off within a month or two. It goes pretty quickly. We try and pull what water we can and use it for dust controls, but it goes so quick that sometimes
Surface water is different than leachate, so we manage them differently.
Yeah, absolutely. The other thing is, this shows some of our wells. We've got a gas collection system throughout this whole landfill, and we're always putting new ones in. In fact, we're putting 6 or 7 more in this area coming up this year, by the end of this year. And what that does, I don't know how familiar you are with it. Right here is this is our flare. It's about a 1200 SCFM flare. We probably generate 500 to 600 SCFM right now.
That's the flow right here.
Of methane and other gases that come. And what happens with it, we put vertical wells and we put horizontal wells in as we're building the landfill. And then that all is connected to the flare down here, which has blowers. It's like a big vacuum. It's always pulling vacuum on it. We have technicians from SCS, engineers that come out and do once a month, twice a month. They manage the well field, they retune it, because the landfill's always changing, different. So they're always managing it. We have access to all that data on a database, so we know what the temperatures are, we know what the flow rate is, we know what the vacuum pressure is. So they monitor all these wells and make sure we're optimizing the removal of methane gas and other gases from here. And the way we're inspected and regulated on that is we have to do quarterly surface emissions monitoring testing. We don't do it. It's a third party and it's through the air board. And basically they come in, they walk grids of 500 by 100 foot grids. If you can imagine, this is all gridded out on another map. They have to walk 4 or 5 times with a little OVA, organic vapor analyzer, on the ground to make sure there's no exceedances. And we've done great. We just did our surface last week, I think, and I don't think we had any hits at all of any gas emissions. So our gas system's working well. So that's all within the footprint of here. Then we have groundwater wells that are up gradient and down gradient.
So show them the flow of the aquifer.
So the aquifer actually runs this way. It comes right down through here. So we have groundwater wells up gradient we have to test, and then we have groundwater wells down gradient, and obviously you don't want to have any constituents that are part of leachate in that groundwater, which we're good with. So then we have a few other groundwater wells around here too, just to keep it. We've in fact installed some new groundwater wells to start the background on the new expansion area. So we put some groundwater wells there. The other thing we have to do is explosive gas monitoring, methane gas. So we collect it all with the gas system, But then every 1,000 feet around the property boundary, we have to have gas probes. So if you're, say you got 100-foot deep of trash here, you got to have a probe that goes at least the depth of the trash, a little bit below. Sometimes we have double and triple nested if it's really deep, so we'll have it shallow, medium, and deep. And then
VOC? Is it VOC monitors?
yeah, we monitor VOCs, methane, CO2, all that stuff. So VOCs are typically they come out of the gas, they can, and they can get into groundwater and stuff like that. But what we're required to do on those is every quarter they have to be monitored along with the probes, and we call them probes and structures. And they monitor those to make sure we don't exceed. You can't have more than 5% outside of your footprint. You got to keep it down, otherwise it's a violation. But we do that every quarter and monitor all that. And it's, like I said, it's 1,000 foot all the way around. Every 1,000 foot spacing all the way around. Really should be at the property boundary. So here's a gas probe right here, for example. There's another gas probe right there. So we're testing those just to make sure that we're keeping everything inside along with what we're doing.
Ryan, you have a question?
Yeah, there's not enough methane gas produced here to be useful for any.
It's getting close to be able to do an evaluation and see what you can do with it. A couple of the issues are transmission lines. If you put in power generators, if you had enough gas, there's no transmission lines. The other thing is if you just cleaned up the gas and put it into a gas, but there's no gas lines here to be able to pump it into. So the only feasible thing you could consider doing is taking it and then cleaning it up and making LP gas, containerizing it, and then taking it off site. And we're getting close to being able to evaluate that. We've got some of our engineers looking at that.
Well, as part of our arrangement with the county, if we can't find an economic solution, they have the right contractually and ability to go develop one themselves. So we're all very mindful of it, both us and the county, of trying to come up with regeneration instead of burning and flaring it off. But we will reach a point. It's just about economics, and then what's the solution? Whether to put in those little tubes and send it off, or set up a fueling station here, et cetera, et cetera. We'll get there. We'll get there.
To give you an example, at one of our other landfills up in Fairfield, we do about 4,000 SCFM probably. We have a contract with DTE Biomass. They built a plant on site, and they have 5 engines, and they do 8 megawatts, 7, 8 megawatts.
I've heard as much as 10, but 7
Yeah,
to 8.
about 8 megawatts of power. But they have a contract with PG&E, and they can't ever expand. That's it. That's the most they can take. So we're going to have excess gas.
At old economics that still are
right.
favorable.
And even at that one, to hit their internal rate of return, a minimum of 15%, it was a tough project to get pushed through the air board because they wanted a lot of stuff that was costing millions of dollars. But we ended up getting it done. But we didn't have power into the site, so they had to build. They had to put the transmission lines from the substation, which is about 7 miles away, and build the facility. So it was about $20 to $25 million project that they had to do. So that's the only way we were able to do it at Potrero. They put the money up. We just supplied the gas, and they've got a 30 or 40-year contract. And so we're able to generate enough power to, I think, 20,000 homes or something like that. We're not there yet, but we will be someday. Here's another retention pond. We got some retention ponds in here. So this is kind of the whole landfill, the whole kit and caboodle. This is if you ever heard of the resource recovery park with the county, that's this property right here. I think there's about 70 acres there.
Well, no, there's 90, of which 70
90?
they're willing to donate as open space as we procure our entitlement.
Okay. So that's kind of it right now.
Well, so, we've gone through some initial public hearings, and, some of the public, call it outcry, if you will, have been about contamination of the aquifer. And just given the science that we're, having to do, in that we have groundwater wells upgrading and downgrading, we know whether our landfills leak. Dave talked about a redundant liner system, the clay and the HDPE liner. Like he's saying, it's a bathtub. We're totally containing our leachate, so there isn't contamination of the groundwater, or the aquifer, as contended by the public. And we talk about the agencies doing their quarterly, monthly inspections. There's quite a bit of scrutiny. Talk about the different agencies.
Well, Count Recycle comes out